Hello, this is Pastor Roger Diaz, and welcome to a new edition of the Voice of the Gentile Church. We got a wonderful question today. I want to remind our listeners that the whole purpose of this program, we have a mission statement, and the whole purpose of the program is to reach out to what I refer to as the Gentile Church that really shouldn't be Gentile. The word Gentile is heathen, and no church or no Christian should consider themselves to be Gentiles. So this program is a voice to that whole concept. Our identity is with Israel, and we should be Israeli in our perspective, which is to be biblical. So a voice to the Gentile church is a plea for us to not be a Gentile church. And every program that we produce, it's done with the intent that we can administer that simple fact, that simple reality, that as believers in Messiah Yeshua, the King of Israel, the Messiah of Israel, we ought to identify with Israel and not so much Rome, Salt Lake City, or any other identity. Our identity is firmly Israel. So we have a question today, but before we get into that question, we've got some current events topics to address or to look at. We have our current event specialist and news analyst specialist, Dolores Lowe, and she's here with us today.
Hello. So last night was primary night across the country, right? And normally we wouldn't cover it because it's American politics, American primaries. It's on the news all the time. But it's been rather loony.
Just be grateful that we don't have a parliament.
True.
Because that would have been a mess.
Could be much worse. But it's been rather loony. For example, in Texas, we have a Democrat running for the House.
All right.
Her name is Maureen Galindo. And she gave a speech where she wants to take all American Zionists and all former ICE agents, put them in internment camps, castrate them. And I mean, she was so over the edge that even AOC and Bernie Sanders disavowed any knowledge of it.
Is she a Muslim?
No.
No.
She's just a wacko Democrat. You know how the Democrats are nowadays,
So
right?
she wants to put Zionists and ICE workers?
ICE agents.
In concentration camps. So
Yes.
let me ask a question, Dolores. Are there concentration camps set up throughout this country?
So you remember COVID, that it came out that FEMA had set up all these camps across
52
the
of them.
country, right? So are there concentration camps? Yeah. And in reality, anything can serve as a concentration camp, right? Remember Alligator Alcatraz?
Yeah.
That took what? Putting up a barbed wire
So
fence,
we got
right?
we got some fringe lunatic, one fringe lunatic out there making that statement. Is it possible that there's a broader scope of people that might feel that way?
Oh, there is. If we go to Maine, we have another wacko Democrat candidate. His name is Graham Plattner. Mm-hmm. This man is, not only is he's the one with the Nazi tattoo.
Okay.
He's an anti-Semite. However,
The Holocaust never happened.
Right, all that stuff.
Okay.
But he takes it even further.
All right.
Because he is a former Marine, and he has made fun of Special Forces soldiers who were injured in battle and nearly died.
Really?
Yeah, and then he's also done all sorts of sexual postings. You know, it never.
So he's a Nazi and a degenerate at the same time.
Absolutely.
I don't think they're separable, to be honest with you.
And there's no question, he had a Reddit account. He has admitted that it was his Reddit account. And he deleted the account, but, you know, people should know nothing ever is deleted on the internet.
Once it's out there, it's out there.
Once it's out there, it's out there. And one of the newspapers in Maine.
Which is scary for me because I've said some outlandish things, but oh boy.
Well, he has one of the newspapers in Maine actually got a hold of the Reddit archives and got his account. And they've been publishing all this crazy stuff that he's been posting, right, over the years.
Wow.
So that's going on. However, on the Republican side last night, so for those people who don't really follow politics, Representative Thomas Massie out of Kentucky has had an ongoing fight with Donald Trump because he openly opposed Donald Trump's budget. He votes against funding for Israel. He votes against And his argument, so Donald Trump went out of his way to endorse his opponent. In 2024, Massey got 40,000 votes. Last night, he got 47,000 votes. However,
Wow.
his opponent got 58,000 votes because so many Republicans, particularly MAGA Republicans and Zionist Republicans, went out to vote that he lost by 10 points, right? I normally wouldn't bring this up, but when you listen to Thomas Massey, he says, "Oh, I'm not an anti-Semite.
Of course not.
I don't believe in giving aid to anybody. I'm not an anti-Semite." However, listen to how he started his concession speech last night. "I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent to concede, and it took me a while to find him in Tel Aviv."
Amazing, huh?
Yep.
Did he have to make that statement? No, he wanted to make that
He
statement.
wanted to make that statement. He wanted to blame the Jews for him losing, and the Zionists for him losing his seat.
You know, I remember back in the early 1980s, when I first began to understand more about, Nazi Germany, all of what Hitler did. It wasn't until the 80s that I began to really understand it. I was amazed that happened, the deception, the manipulation, the propaganda. How did that succeed is what everyone was asking. I asked that question. And so here we are today. We're seeing the slow build towards something like that, but on a much larger scale, right here in continental United States of America, where this sentiment is growing. It's growing on a grassroots level. How's that even possible? Of course, behind it is the animus of Islam. You can't miss it, right?
Yep.
They're behind the scenes. Hezbollah is not just an outfit in Lebanon. Hezbollah is in South America. Hezbollah has infiltrated our universities in the Muslim Brotherhood, vis-a-vis the Muslim Brotherhood. And they've been slowly sowing those seeds. And so now there's a horrid vine of just malignant hatred towards the Jewish people. But like we've talked about in this program many times, God is using this for what purpose? Two purposes. One, to bring the people of Israel to the land of Israel. Two, to bring his enemies to the land of Israel. Right. 1 and 2. Yep. 1, again, to bring the people of Israel back to their ancestral land. And 2, to bring his enemies to his land. And that pertains to judgment. That's what's happening. I used to sit back in the 1990s, Dolores, we probably talked about this and wonder, how is this whole thing going to happen? What is the mechanisms that's going to be used to bring the people of Israel out from this country and other parts of the diaspora and cause them to return to the land of Israel? And we're seeing it, right?
Yep. I mean, if you had told me 4 years ago that October 7th would have happened, that the atrocities that were committed would have been committed, and people would be defending Hamas, I would not have believed it.
Crazy. Flotillas of hardcore leftists claiming to bring supplies to Gaza, and 20 ships were stopped, and there was not one supply there. It was just, the whole world has gone crazy. And so here we are, the pathway to Armageddon. I used to ask, how is that going to happen?
We're
so here we are.
Yep.
And I feel bad for the young people, young Americans, people in general around the world. The very young people are so gullible, so susceptible. And that's, like we've said before, it's because they're not biblically grounded. They don't have a ground in the Bible.
Yep.
But an amazing time that we're in. So tell me about, we don't want to talk about disclosure. I want to disclose that. But 16 rocket scientists associated with secret government programs.
Yeah, aerospace and nuclear,
disappeared?
Yeah, the FBI.
Is that real?
Yeah, the FBI actually has an investigation open on it.
Wow.
Oops.
So Dolores, you might want to be careful about what you talk about. I'm just saying.
Yeah, the FBI actually has a investigation open on it. One of the scientists, Elizabeth Varga, I'm sorry, that's a reporter. One of the scientists, Amy Eskridge, had told everybody that if she were to die by suicide, something was wrong.
Yeah.
And
She actually made that statement.
yeah.
Wow.
She said it would not be true as stated.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm being targeted by directed energy weapons. However, her father believes she committed suicide. And it
Of
could
course.
be you don't want to think that your child.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
No,
yeah.
her statement up front was intelligent and believable. And so, wow, that's an amazing thing.
Yep. So
What
the
do you
FBI does
think
have
is
a case
going on
open.
there, Dolores? I mean, let's think about it. Tulsi Gabbard's office got raided by the CIA.
That still blows my mind.
Documents taken away right in the middle of this so-called disclosure period. And right in the middle of this disclosure period, we have scientists that were involved with secret projects involving space and whatever, disappearing. Put it together. What's going on?
I don't know, but having Tulsi Gabbard raided by the CIA is totally against the law because the CIA is not allowed to conduct operations on American soil. They're strictly an organization that conducts operations
So
outside of the
who are they
US.
acting on behalf of?
I don't know, and somebody should be investigating, right? The DOJ should be looking at that going, what are you doing? So, and who knows? I mean, it could be a foreign government
Right.
killing these people or taking these people. I mean, they're all aerospace and nuclear scientists, so they all have critical information in
Yeah.
their brains, right?
Yeah, it could be. Hezbollah, Muslim Brotherhood, are extremely barbaric and messy. I can't see them successfully carrying this out the way it's being done. Who could it be? Russia, China? They don't carry the hallmarks of anything Russian. The Russian way is very gruff. They don't. They leave evidences.
Right.
China is more carefully crafted,
They're
and
finesse.
you would recognize
Yeah.
the hand of China if China was involved.
Yeah, they usually bring in a mole to
Yeah.
make buddy with you. like
Yep.
Representative
there's
Swalwell's
usually
girlfriend.
poison
yeah.
involved.
Diane
Chinese love
Feinstein's
the poison.
driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. So, yes.
Wow.
But more to come because it is being investigated.
Wow, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
An amazing thing.
Then-
So Jesse Waters is dealing a lot with this whole disclosure thing. It's upsetting a lot of people, Dolores. It's upsetting a lot of Christians.
I still have a hard time. I cannot get worked up about it. I'm sorry. Simply because there's two things, right? It could either be there are real aliens, right? I have no issues if God decided to create additional beings in the universe. He's God. He can do whatever he wants.
I
My
don't
little
know.
old me isn't going to
Those
say anything.
those four
Right.
entities that they keep illustrating are pretty ugly.
Right.
I don't know if
Or-
God created them.
Yeah. Or they could
Listen,
be.
I disagree with you in that regard. We don't disagree much, but I kind of struggle to believe that aliens are independently functioning here in God's creation apart from God's direct involvement.
Well, it could be aliens.
Or it could
Or
be
it could be demons,
Right.
angels, you name it. It could be spiritual beings, right?
right, but nothing transpires in this universe
Without God.
without
I
God's
agree.
direct and purposed involvement.
Absolutely. I agree. Yes.
So they're either angelic or they're demonic.
Right.
Angelic meaning that they're agents of what God is doing, or they're demonic. And that troubles me deeply because if they are demonic, why are they manifesting?
Well, we're near the end times, right?
So in the book of Revelation, it talks about angels being released from the bottomless pit.
Yep.
You see, the problem I have with this is Christians are trying to say, well, this is all AI, or this is now a modern phenomena that's related to the book of Revelation, right?
Right.
But wait a minute. There's been these sorts of sightings throughout history.
Yep.
What about the Foo Fighters? You know the story of the Foo Fighters. Look it up real quick. Foo Fighters that harassed the RAF planes, the Royal Air Force, during World War II. Foo Fighters were, and even our pilots were dealing with these Foo Fighters. What were the Foo Fighters? They were little spherical objects that were darting past our World War II planes, swinging around the planes and just kind of buzzing. What are these orbs that we call Foo Fighters from 1944, 1942? So you see, you can't say that this is AI or this is demonic or this is American technology because this was happening 60 years ago. You
Yep.
see what the Foo Fighters
Yep.
are, right?
Right. Yep. 1944.
Foo Fighters. I mean, it's real. Lisa's uncle, he joined the area from Trinidad, and he flew. And he told me about these Foo Fighters. What did they think it was? They thought they were balls of fire, lightning. But the problem with that is these Foo Fighters were following planes, zooming past them, playing with them.
Yep.
So it's hard for me to perceive that what we call, UFOs or whatever we want to tag them, are new and AI only. Yes, AI is involved. And yes, our government is playing with technology, dark matter technology, anti-gravity technology. Yes, we're doing it. But these things have been around longer than our technology.
Yeah, I mean,
How do you deal with that?
so Trump released UFO. Gosh, must have been 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. There were 78 different reports,
Right.
and it was everything from the 1940s throughout to up to now, right?
And there's been occasions of sightings before then.
Yep.
So here's my take down on this. My not final, but I'll talk about this again, I guess. We as Christians ought not to be intimidated or confronted by this. We don't understand the totality of who God is and his realm. We know that the Bible talks about these angels, these angels with four faces, winged creatures with tails, serpentine creatures, the seraphim. We don't understand the fullness of the spirit realm that we are not a part of. Who knows what we're seeing? Yes, there's a lot of demonic deception. I refuse to believe that demonic entities are physically manifesting. It has to be spiritual deception on one hand. On the other hand, you can't just paint with a broad brush and say, well, I have all the answers. You see, Christian pastors and Christian leaders are worried. They're worried and they're panicking. They're not willing to do what I just did and make the statements that I just made. I'm not afraid of the idea of things being seen. One, there is deception. Two, there is a lot that we don't understand about God's realm, his kingdom. And we just have to trust him. He's on the throne. At his right hand is Yeshua, his son. There are a multitude of angels, all sorts of beings, living creatures. And when you look in Ezekiel chapter 1, Dolores, and you look at what came down from heaven, that's amazing. But more amazing than that are the four living creatures.
Right.
They had wings. They were cherubim. They had four aspects of faces: human, ox, lion, and a bear. Listen, we don't understand the fullness of the spirit realm. What troubles humanity is our lack of understanding. We see something, we perceive something, we have to lock it in. This is what it is.
Right.
And we don't really know.
Well, it kind of bothers me in the sense. Remember Y2K?
Yeah, the world was coming to an end.
Gosh. Yes. The world was going to come to an end.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
Everybody was amassing their, they were all prepping, they were all saving stuff, and it just made us
running for the hills.
And two things. There were people who actually I remember in Southeast Asia, there was a community of Christians in a predominantly Muslim country. And they went to the top of this hill because they thought Y2K was coming. And what ended up happening is they all got arrested, right? So you got that. That type of irresponsibility breeds that. And then on the other side, when it all passed and nothing happened, we looked like fools, right?
Well, that's been the case. And it's the cause for so much occultic activity. There was that group of people that believed that Comet Shoemaker was going to pass by and they were going to be scooped up, and they all committed suicide. And
I remember that.
So the truth is, we cannot be shaken, must not be shaken by what we're seeing. The writer of the book of Hebrews said, anything that can be shaken in these days will be shaken. So we're not to be shaken by this. We don't have to go to and fro looking for answers about UFOs or UAPs or whatever.
Right.
We're on solid foundation. Yes, much of this is demonic, satanic, delusional stuff, AI even, our technology being back engineered perhaps, but there's the reality of God's kingdom that we just don't understand.
You know,
But we don't have to.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
We tend to try to get ahead of things and run ahead of things. Like, you know, in the book of Revelation, when the image gets
The beast.
the beast gets hit on the head and dies
Womb,
and
yeah,
and
fatal womb.
Yeah. And people are like going crazy trying to figure out how that could happen and this and that. I'm like, it's enough to know that it is going to
It's
happen.
funny because when Trump got his ear nicked,
Yes.
within hours, fatal womb comes back to life. It's just an amazing thing. That just speaks to the fact, Dolores and listeners, that we are not only fallen, we're like ants sitting on an ant's hill, and around us are zero-turn mowers, vehicles, drones, airplanes, but we're ants sitting on an ant hill, and we're trying to analyze just exactly what's happening around us, and we're treating it like we have the answers here, folks. We just don't know.
Yep, absolutely. And then our final story is, this isn't anywhere in the American press that I have seen.
Yeah.
So apparently there are Egyptian forces amassing on the Israeli border, about 40,000 forces. Egypt is claiming that what they're trying to do is keep Hamas from crossing the border into them. However, not only are the forces amassing there, but they've also done things like deployed armored vehicles, their Chinese defense systems, their M60 battle tanks. They've upgraded airfields.
Yeah.
All things that don't scream Hamas, but scream all-out war, right?
Well, they're trying to secure their airfields. Goes back to the 6-Day War, when Israel wrecked their air force by destroying their airfields. I see Egypt trying to make a statement here. You know, I just got a message from our friend in Judea, Jeremy Gimpel, and he told me that there's a strong sense of the anticipation of something looming in Israel. They don't know exactly what it is, but they know that there's something big on the horizon, and they can sense it, they can feel it. It's visceral within the very body of the nation of Israel. So, but he said we're celebrating Shavuot and we're anticipating to rejoice for Shavuot. So, yes, there is something on the horizon. It is looming. It's Armageddon. It's that final great conflict when all the nations will assemble, will amass against Israel with vehement hatred. And we're seeing that hatred taking root now.
Right. Yes.
So it's not, Armageddon, the end of the world as we know it. It's not that, right? We've talked about that many times. For the Christians who are looking to be raptured out of here, maybe it's the end of the world for them. But God's preparing a new age, the age of the Messiah. And so that's just what we need to think about. So we have a question. So a good friend of mine text me on Saturday, on Shabbat, and I really didn't want to deal with a 200-word text, but I got it. And she was troubled because she's attending a church where the pastor is not exactly supportive of Israel, but claims to be supportive of Israel. Your family has connection, historic connection with that church.
At one point, my oldest daughter and her husband went to that
That's
church.
where she married, right?
Yep, that's where
I
she
remember
married.
going there, yeah. I'm not going to name the church. And so this friend of mine, who's very Israel conscious, very Israel focused, has the right perspective on Israel, and she's very determined to keep it. She sent this text to me, and she said she challenged the pastor about replacement theology, secessionary teaching, right? And he kind of gave her a wishy-washy answer, but then he sent her a text, kind of like the patented response type text. And she sent me the texts that she got from this pastor, and he basically said it looked like just a classic pull the file email and send it out. So that means that he's been sending that email out to other people as well, responding to the question of replacement theology. So this is what she did. Her challenge was, are you replacement theology? Do you believe in replacement theology? So he gave a sort of a wishy-washy immediate answer, but then sent her the email. And I looked at the email, and it was startling. All right, he started off by saying, "Of course not. We're not replacement theology. We're biblical. We're a biblical church, and so on." And then he went into this whole spiel that we're not replacement theology, but we believe that everything that we see in the Old Testament, going all the way back to God's covenant with Abraham, was allegorical or archetypal, pointing to the church. And it was all patterns and symbolisms, and that the church is the fulfillment of everything that Israel was pictured to be in the Bible. It's not replacement theology, right?
Replacement theology.
Well, it's not classic replacement theology, but it's replacement theology of a different kind, right?
So a little history on that church is they've had a pastoral change because the previous pastor got ill and passed away, right? So under the previous pastor, they were very much supporters of Israel. I don't know under this new pastor. I do know that all of our family that used to go to that church no longer goes to that church.
Right.
So, but I don't know what the new pastor is like.
Well,
like that.
Based on the email that this person shared with me, and it was typed by him. He had his name on it. They're not pro-Israel. Mm-hmm. They would say that they're pro-Israel. Why? Because they're in the Bible Belt. Any church, any evangelical church in the Bible Belt will be nuts to say that they're not pro-Israel. But are they really pro-Israel? That's the question.
Right.
If you are saying that everything in regards to Israel and God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were all archetypal pointers pointing to Christianity, if that's what you're saying, you're not pro-Israel.
Right.
You're effectively saying that Israel no longer exists. It was just a picture. It was just a symbol of what God will do with Christianity. Right. In other words, we Christians, we are the pinnacle of what God is doing in the earth.
Right.
Israel was just a pointer. I know I see that worse than classic replacement theology. So we did a program here. Maybe you can dig into the archives. It wasn't a video podcast. It was a, true podcast. And the name of the podcast was Replacement Theology of the Third Kind. And what we did was we talked about the classic replacement theology, Council of Nicaea, and all of what was established following that. And then we talked about Messianic Judaism replacement theology, how that is replacement theology. And then we talked about how the two-house movement, which has fizzled out more or less, how that is another type of replacement theology. Because with the two-house movement, they are saying that they are the 10 lost tribes.
Right.
And that they're returning, and that's replacement theology of the third kind. Now we're seeing replacement theology of the fourth kind.
So
a fourth dimension. We thought there were only 3 dimensions.
Oh no, there's an infinite number of dimensions, according to quantum physics.
The fourth dimension.
But it is whether intentional or not, it is a fundamental misunderstanding or distortion of the Bible. Does the Bible point to Jesus from beginning to end? Yes, it does. But that has nothing to do with the role that God has given Israel and with superseding that role that God has given Israel, right?
Absolutely.
And they are either twisting it on purpose.
Well, they have to do something to support their pro-biblical post-biblical Christianity. And what do I mean by post-biblical Christianity? In the 3rd century, 325 AD, at the Council of Nicaea, they didn't subscribe to the totality of the Bible. The Tanakh, right. The Old Testament, really didn't exist in its purest form. But they knew the prophets, they knew the books of the prophets, and that didn't count. They took the position following the Council of Nicaea that everything that was promised to Israel is relevant to us. And that began that process, wasn't biblical. So the Protestant church came into existence after the Reformation. And initially, most of the Reformation was Zionist, restorationist. Initially, just about 80% of the Protestant movement in the first century and a half or so was saying, hey, this is the time God's restoring Israel. That's where we ought to be focused. So much so that the Puritans here later on was still focused on Israel. Nevertheless, now we've become the Protestant church or the evangelical church. We're now post-biblical because we're not subscribing to the Bible. What we do is we cherry pick from here, we cherry pick from there. And when did this begin? Listen, I talk about this a lot. This whole drift away from the actual foundational truth of the Bible concerning Israel started with the ecumenical movement in the early 1900s. Because before that, most Protestants would say Israel is Israel.
Right.
And look at what they're returning to the land of Israel. They would have said that in the 1600s, in the 1700s, the 1800s. It was after the ecumenical movement when some global entity decided that the time has come to consolidate Christianity, is when it was decided that Israel has no part in this. And we cannot have an Israel in this new world religion that we're working on. So every church movement, every Christian movement began to grapple to discover how they can omit Israel. And replacement theology is ancient, but this is new.
Yep.
This is not ancient. This is the fourth dimension of replace. I dread that there might be a sixth or seventh dimension, but you see, maybe the other dimensions has to do with Islam. But you see, this is so much of what the devil would like for the church to get involved in. That, everything in the Old Testament are all allegorical types to point to who we are. For God so loved Christianity that he gave his only begotten son.
On the opening paragraph of the Bible, there is Jesus. And if you don't know why,
the lamb slain
give
from
us a
the
call.
wolf. Yeah.
Give us a call. We'll tell you how Jesus is on that very first opening of the Bible. At the end of the Bible, there is Jesus. Yeah. In between there, God chose one man who became one family, who became one people to carry his standard on the earth.
Yeah.
And nothing's going to change that. So Christians just need to get over it.
I think, we talk about disclosure, demonic influence. And yes, I think if you want to find demonic influence, look at what Christianity has become.
Yes.
Consider Christian doctrine concerning the Bible, the reality of the Bible, concerning Israel, and you would see demonic activity. It's a demonic spirit that works within the heart of people who are not biblical to oppose the Jewish nation. And you know what? You would think by now we would know better because the opposition of Israel has never succeeded. It has brought pain upon Israel and hardship, which God has used to form and mold the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel today is a strong nation. Why? Because they've been through the fire and they've been refined. And so the nations should know better by now that if you apply pressure on Israel, nuggets come out of that dross. Mm-hmm. What comes as a result of the hardship put upon Israel? A stronger nation. Mm-hmm. So if you really hate Israel, you need to begin to love them because every time you express that hate, something good comes out.
Yep.
And that's God's way of bringing the nations down to Jehoshaphat, the valley of judgment. Listen, replacement theology, you cannot clean it up.
The sad thing is there is so much richness in the Bible. And I mean, I have this argument all the time because my daughter-in-law, very strong Christian, but she will be the first one to tell you, I haven't spent enough time in the Old Testament. And I'm like, oh my God, you have missed out on so much. Because there is so much richness in the Bible. And God brings it to us.
Does she go to a standard Christian church?
Yeah, she goes to a standard Christian church. And God brings it to us through the nation of Israel. Every picture he has painted for us, Old Testament, New Testament, it all came and comes through the nation of Israel. You cannot divorce yourself from that.
Israel is the rich olive tree. And we're going to read a little bit of that, what Paul talked about. The letter to the church at Rome, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people have really gross misunderstandings of what Paul was addressing in that letter to the church at Rome. The letter has been taken to become this document of Christian doctrine, which it should not have been. Paul was addressing wrong attitudes in the church, coming from one, the super legalistic Jewish believers, to the antinomian Romans. it was a horrible schism. And Paul, his work there was to bring an end to that and say to that church, listen, you're not Jew or Greek here.
Right.
You're something entirely different. Get along, work together, because there's a ministry in your hands. And that was his whole point. The ministry was what he said in Romans chapter 15, verse 7 and 8. He said, Messiah, the body of Messiah, the ministry of Messiah has become a servant to the circumcision, who is Israel, to confirm to them the promises given to the fathers. So that's such a profound statement. It underscores the entire book of Romans. And what he's saying is, antinomian Romans, get your act together. Israel is the olive tree. You cannot replace the olive tree. So the idea that somehow, we Christians today, that one church that we talked about, didn't bring the name forward, can make that statement today and say, well, everything in the Old Testament, it's all archetypal. It's making the statement that it all points to Christianity because we're such a better class of human beings. Israel, just a story to be told. That right there is odious. That fourth dimension of replacement theology is hideous, more hideous than the three other dimensions. And so what Paul said in Romans chapter 11 is so quintessential, devastating to replacement theology. So let's just read a little bit. So in Romans chapter 11, so what he did in this letter to the church at Rome is he devoted the first 3-4 chapters to the very legalistic Jewish believers who were sort of holding themselves up against the Roman believers. And he said to them, listen, don't apply heavy application of law on these Gentiles, former Gentiles, because you yourself can't fully carry it out and fulfill it. Give them an opportunity, he said, to by faith attain to righteousness. Justification by faith. And that was his whole point. Justification by keeping the law didn't work for us. Why do you expect it to work for these Romans? And that's his rebuke, right? But then it was as if he was chomping at the bit to get after the Roman believers and put them in a square hole where they belong. And in Romans chapter 11, he just pulled the plug. He starts off by saying in verse 11, I say then, did they, meaning Israel, did they stumble so as to fall? Did they? May it never be. But by their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make them jealous. And that's how he introduces. So let's read verse 12. We'll read some, we'll keep reading. Now, if their transgression is richness for the world, and their failure is riches for the Gentiles, how much more will be their fulfillment? Will the fulfillment of them, of who they are, be? So, again, how much more will their fulfillment be? What does Paul mean? He's talking about the time when all of Israel becomes that nation that God has called them to be. He's not talking about they becoming Christians.
Right.
He's talking about they becoming that picture of God's people. How much more will the fulfillment of who Israel is to be? But I am speaking to you who are Gentiles, inasmuch then as I am an apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry, if somehow I might move to jealousy my fellow countrymen and save some of them. For if their rejection is reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance be but life from the dead? If the first piece of dough is holy, the lump is also, and if the root is holy, the branches are too. So that's his beginning statements concerning this attitude towards Israel. But then he goes on. But if some of the branches were broken off, you being a wild olive, were grafted in among them and became partaker with them of the rich root of the olive tree. The rich root of the olive tree, he's talking about Israel. And the foundation thereof, Torah, the temple, the reality of the kingdom of God being established in Israel, Zionism, that's the rich root, the hope of Israel. So you see what he said there, Dolores? Tell me, what's he saying? If the first piece of dough is holy, the lump is also. And if the root is holy, the branches are too.
Right. So, we were grafted in. And,
Yeah.
and you're a botanist and you're a hobbyist
Kind of.
botanist. You know about grafting all the time, right? If the root is not healthy, doesn't matter what you graft in, it's not going to survive.
Right.
You know, and I think verse 18 should be the verse to hand to these people.
All right. So in regards to grafting, I can't take an olive tree and graft a mango on it.
Right.
I can't do it. I can graft other olives on it, a wild olive, right? So let's read on. But if some of the branches were broken, oh no, he said some of the branches, right? He's not talking about the tree being uprooted, but if some of the branches were broken off, and you Gentiles, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them, and became partaker with them of the rich olive tree, the root of the rich olive tree, do not be arrogant towards the branches.
Yep.
But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you.
Yep.
Now, what can you say about that? The root there being the foundation of the tree, the source of life for the tree. The olive tree is Israel. You can't take it out of context. He says, don't be arrogant. It's like, we have a couple olive trees out here. They're two different trees, right? One tree is prospering while the other one isn't. If I say I'm going to take a branch off of the tree that's not doing well, and I'm going to graft it into the tree that is doing well, for what purpose am I doing it?
To make that branch healthy.
To make that branch healthy, yes. To give it a part of the root of that tree. I wouldn't say why that tree is healthy, but it has something to do with that. Anyway, so if I do that, I'm giving that branch an opportunity to bear fruit that comes from the source of that olive tree, which are the roots. Now, the fruit is going to be different, but it's going to be unique to that olive tree. It's going to be different, but it's going to complement the olive tree, right? So you have to look at it that way. The root is what God has provided for Israel, the foundation. The tree is Israel. We are the wild branches grafted, and Paul is so clear. Do not be arrogant. That has to echo in us. Verse 19. You will say then branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Quite right. They were broken off for their unbelief, but you stand by your faith. Do not be conceited, but fear.
Right.
So he's telling these Romans to be humble about who Israel is. Yes, Israel was about to be destroyed at this point in time. It was obvious to everyone that the Romans are going to just destroy Jerusalem. Paul knew it. This was written about 10 years before 70 AD. So it was clear. So Paul is speaking from that perspective, but he's still saying, hey, the tree is not going to be destroyed here.
Right.
All right, so let's read on. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Behold the kindness and severity of God. To those who fell, severity. But to you, God's kindness, if you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. So Christianity needs to hear this. You can't take the fourth dimension of replacement theology and say, well, all of that are allegorical types of who we are. That's arrogance. Is that arrogance?
Okay, so, and here's
No,
part
tell me, is that arrogant?
That is absolute
That is arrogance.
Think back to, so Jesus didn't just appear on the scene all of a sudden, poof, right? Here's Jesus, right?
Yeah.
All the evidence for Jesus and his messiahship lies in the Old Testament.
Right.
If we are going to say that Israel in the Old Testament is an allegory, then how can you rely on those prophecies which point to Jesus?
Well, we don't consider the prophets. Prophets? What's that? Prophets? We might get some. If everyone tithes, there might be a prophet. Listen, Christianity has lost its compass.
It has.
Lost its compass.
Unfortunately.
How could you continue to bear this idea about Israel when Paul made such a passionate statement? Let's continue to read what Paul says. All right, so and we read verse 22. I'll read it again into 24. Behold the kindness and severity of God. To those who fell, severity, but to you, God's kindness. If I love that. if you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. That's a stark warning. And then he says, and they also, if they do not continue in their unbelief, will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. Mm-hmm. He's talking about restoration of Israel. For if you were cut off from what by nature was a wild tree and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated tree, how much more will these who are the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? So in that statement, he's talking about restoration of Israel.
Yep.
Israel becoming that nation that God has called them to be. We're seeing it today. We're seeing that olive tree is beginning to blossom. It's beginning to show signs of its fruitfulness. So I'm going to read a little more. For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation. Is that a rebuke?
Yes.
A rebuke. That's a rebuke. I know rebuke. That partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Now, we evangelicals, we like to say, well, Paul's talking about when that final Christian is saved. The fullness of the Gentile comes in. That final Christian becomes a Christian. That final heathen becomes a Christian. The fullness of the Gentiles has come in. What do you think about that?
No.
I know what Paul is saying, but what do you think about that?
No. They are making a fundamental mistake. They are putting Christianity in this isolated box. If it were not for Judaism, Christianity would not exist.
Doesn't have, you see, that's the point. You don't have a source without the root.
Right. And they are absolutely missing that mark completely. That's number one. Number two.
Why are we referring to Christianity as the? But we're Christians.
Because we
don't want to present ourselves.
I've said this before. I have a hard time using the label Christian because it has been so corrupted by the Christians.
So I want to make a statement. It's not a disclaimer. It's just a reality. We are disciples of Jesus. Mm-hmm. We are indelibly connected to the reality of the New Testament. We see the Jesus of the New Testament, the book of Matthew and onwards, as the Messiah of Israel, the King of Israel, very much Jewish, Ben Israel, son of David. We see him as the great king, the Zemach, and that's how we see him. That's not very Christian. Right. We also believe in the reality of his return to Zion. We're Zionists. Wow. Where does that come from? Acts chapter 1. Is it now that you will restore the kingdom to Israel? No one knows the time or the hour, not even the angels, not me, but only the Father. The kingdom is being restored to Israel. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how many times will I have gathered you, but you will not? You'll not see me again until you see. So Jesus is coming to reign in Zion. Not very Christian.
You know, it makes
so I can say us and them.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes my heart hurt because if you were to follow their logic, if they were to apply logic to what they are saying, they're in essence saying God is a liar.
But the Bible isn't exactly correct. We have to define it.
No.
We have to give treatment to the Bible.
We don't stand on sand, right?
Right.
I don't know what they think, but my Bible's a rock.
You know, I'll tell you something in regards to that statement you just made. Jesus gave his very first sermon, powerful sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. He gave that sermon just above Capernaum in the Galilee. And the sermon is misunderstood by so many people. First of all, Matthew chapter 5 is a commentary on Torah. Mm-hmm. Very much in alignment with some of the rabbis who came after him. Very clear, very concise. But he ended that sermon with a powerful statement. Well, a couple of powerful statements. In Matthew chapter 7, he said something that's very important to this whole point. He says, on the day of his coming, many will say to him, Lord, Lord, why are you rejecting us? Haven't we done this in your name, and in your name done this, and so on? He will say, depart from me, I never knew you, you who practice
lawlessness,
disobedience to Torah. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. You who practice lawlessness, disobedience to Torah, depart from me, I never knew you. But then he stopped right there and he said, anyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be likened unto a wise man who builds his house on a rock.
Yeah.
The wind comes, the river rises, and it stands. And then he says, any man who builds his house on the sand, who does not listen to my words, who rejects Torah. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And so he goes on in that second part of the statement at the end of the sermon. He said, if anyone hears these words of mine and does not do them, is likened unto a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The wind comes, the rain comes, and it washes away. What did he do? He closed his Bible and he dropped it and he walked off.
Yep.
There he goes. Made that final statement. So you see, that's the Jesus that I love. Mm-hmm. That's the Jesus that's come in to establish his kingdom, the Father's kingdom in the earth. He's a Zionist. He is upholding the Torah. He is the living Torah. Christianity is insane in taking the positions that they take concerning this madness. Again, replacement theology of the fourth kind. I mean, what do we expect? 20 dimensions of replacement theology. I wouldn't be surprised. I think we are so given over to the demonic realm that we just keep coming up with different ways to undermine Israel. Mm-hmm. When Israel is, in fact, the people of the book. The people of the book. The Muslims know it. They don't do anything about it, but they know it. Let's finish up what Paul said here in Romans chapter 11. So the Gentiles fullness of Gentiles come in. Listen, when Paul made that statement, it was in alignment with other texts in the Bible that basically says there will come a time when God will judge the Gentiles.
Yep.
Bring the Gentile nations into judgment. So what did he say? Partial hardness has happened to Israel until the time of the judgment of the Gentiles. Then the blindness will be lifted off. Today we're seeing it. It's happening, right?
Yep.
Let's read. And so all of Israel will be saved, just as it is written. Now listen up. The deliverer will come from Rome.
No.
The deliverer will come from Zion. And he will remove ungodliness from Jacob. This is my covenant with them. When I take away their sins, God's going to remove the iniquity of Israel. All of the prophets talked about that. When Paul made that statement, he was quoting from Isaiah. Okay, from the standpoint of the gospel, they are enemies for your sake, but from the standpoint of God's choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. For the gifts and callings are irrevocable. What's the word irrevocable?
You can't take it back.
Changeable?
Nope. Cannot
Adaptable?
take it back. Nope.
The gifts and callings
solid
are
like a rock.
without, like that rock. The rock there, God's word. The gifts and callings are without repentance, irrevocable, and it relates to Israel.
And I love the way modern Christianity loves to quote that for you and me as individuals, right?
Yeah.
And they just don't.
So one of the effects of replacement theology of all four kinds is that you are free to take every promise that's relegated to Israel and appropriate it to yourself. And maybe that's what they think Paul meant when he said that Christ has become a servant to the circumcision in order to confirm the promises given to the fathers. Maybe that's what he meant. That we can appropriate those promises to ourselves.
But no, they only appropriate the good promises.
Of course, well, naturally.
There are some bad promises.
Nobody embraces a curse.
Yeah.
So let's see. Replacement theology of all four kinds. We take the blessings, you Jews, you take the curses.
Yep. That's exactly how they behave.
Isn't that what's happening? Mm-hmm. What an incredible religion we've become.
Yep.
Puts people like us in a quagmire. What do we call ourselves? Christians? Zionists?
I don't know. It's between the conventional church doing all this craziness, and then people out there claiming that they're Christians yet behaving absolutely not like a Christian. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't even know what to call myself anymore.
Now, the Jesus of the book of Matthew, the Jesus of the Bible, could you imagine his facial expressions as pastors get up and say these things? I don't think he would even listen to them, but What do you think the Jesus of the book of Matthew would say to people that are saying things that are absolutely contrary to his word?
Depart
He
from
would
me,
say,
I knew you
"Depart
not."
from me. I never knew you. Your belief system is not grounded in Torah. You're lawless."
Yes.
Is what he would say. And there's no excuse, because the very Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, lifts the people of Israel up.
Right.
It does talk about judgment, diaspora, sure, Deuteronomy, even Leviticus chapter 26. There is the reality of chastisement, of diaspora. But you have no excuse, Christian, because it also points clearly to the time when he will restore Israel. Why are you blinded, Christian? Partial blindness
Yes.
has occurred to Christianity because we cannot see that the Torah itself points to the restoration of Israel, God's love and commitment to Israel. We're on sand. We've built our house on sand.
You know, part of this thing is also the bastardization that is happening by bringing in teachings like Word of Faith movement, right? Because, if you're a true, good Christian, then God will only bless you. There will be nothing wrong
So,
in your
since
life.
you brought that up, let's sit on that for a brief moment. The Word of Faith movement, they're all about Israel. Oh, but wait a minute. If you bless Israel, you'll receive a blessing.
Right, yeah.
And they're talking about your pocketbook.
Yep.
So let's raise funds for a project in Israel, because if we bless Israel, we will be blessed. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem; they shall prosper that love thee. Don't go on. They don't go further in the Psalm, and it talks about God's house and the establishment of God's house. No, just pray for the peace of Jerusalem; you'll receive a blessing.
Right.
Listen, again, we've lost our compass. We've lost our compass. So, which camera should I look at here? We've got 3 cameras. So for our Christian friends, our listeners, I want you to consider everything that was discussed here today. Put it in light of what the Bible actually says, not in light of what Christianity gives us. Put it in biblical context, and you would see that what we talked about today was exactly correct. Now, we're not asking that you buy us a cup of coffee or anything like that. If what we said here resonates with you, share it, like it. We want that, because this word must go out. Subscribe, share, like. Is that what they say?
Yep.
You don't have to buy us a cup of coffee, although you no. So just consider what we talked about. We are not Jewish. We don't desire to be Jewish. We are not the olive tree. We're not exactly Israel, but we're grafted in. That means that our identity is with Israel. People like us, we fight many battles, because there's always opposition to the truth. And we're not afraid of that, because whenever we fight a battle, we're aligning with the people of Israel. The struggles that we see Israel with today, that they're dealing with today, are very much the same types of struggles that we deal with. Slander. Blood libels even. I've been blood libeled. And other things. The church here at Fellowship Church, we deal with the struggles that's necessary to be identified with the nation of Israel. And we keep going. And so I want to encourage you that if you want to be biblical, you need to stray away or walk away from conventional Christianity. I'm just going to put it to you that way. Depart conventional Christianity. You're not being unfaithful to any entity other than what was established at Nicaea. I'm not telling you to walk away from Christians necessarily, but from the conventionality of Christianity, it is a construct that keeps us in bondage. Embrace what the Bible says. Don't be lawless. Don't be one of those people that Jesus will address when he comes. Be the people of the Word of God. Stand on the Word of God. Torah, the prophets, the New Testament. Believe he is the author and finisher of our faith. And that's what we see at the very end of the book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. That's who he is. Mm-hmm. And so I want to encourage you to study the Word and be grounded in the Bible. There's such freedom and such power for those who ground themselves in God's Word. So Sunday, May 24th at 7 p.m., Sarah and Andy Benedict will be at Fellowship Church. They're bringing their music. It's a concert. They have albums of music, all original music, and it should be a very good time. Again, 7 o'clock on the 24th of May. Also, if you have questions or comments, voice at buildupzion.org is where you would send it. And keep those insults coming. Keep them coming. They put me to sleep at night. No, I'm not joking. I'm joking. No, if you have challenges for me, you can put them on the questions and so on. And I'll if you're not absurd or rude, I'll address it. If you have genuine questions, I'll stay up at night and answer your questions. So that's our program. Shalom.